We have a quorum. So we will get the meeting started. Is any discussion on the agenda for tonight or the minutes from last week? If not, then without objection, the agenda and minutes are approved. Next thing on the agenda was an explanation of the bulk mailing delays from the processing company. I filed a formal complaint with them on Wednesday morning after the meeting. They turned it over to their QC folks. Their QC people looked into it, gave me a call back Friday with the explanation. They said they, first of all, they record all of their, all the phone conversations and so on. And you may recall from Tuesday's meeting, I stated that I'd looked at 4 different bulk mailing companies that would mail out the 1,400 odd letters that had to go out. And I told all of them the same thing. I said, we have the letter, we have the addresses. The letters need to go out not later than March 16th, so that they'll arrive, which is a Wednesday, so that they would arrive in the mailboxes not later than the 21st or 22nd, early that following week. And that I was selecting bids from 4 different companies, and that's what I told all of them. And their QC folks said that they did in fact hear me tell him that. One of the 4 companies said they couldn't meet the timeline, so the other 3 companies that gave me a bid took the lowest bid. Got the budget from Jackie at the auditor's office, so that we could hire them. Gave them the letter on March 8th. As I said on Tuesday, they told me on March 16th that everything went to the post office, so I figured everything was going to be fine. What the QC people found out is that when the guy put the order in, he put the order in for the mailing to get into the post office by March 16th, but he quoted it at standard postage instead of first class postage. And they said standard postage takes 10 to 14 days or more to get through. Right. So the company said that they can't do anything from a postage perspective, but they can reimburse the county for the cost of their processing, $600 and some odd dollars that they'll reimburse the county for the work that they did. But he said there's clearly an error on the part of the guy that took the order. He said, it's clear you told them when it had to be in the mailboxes. He should have processed it at first class, but they didn't. So that was why the letters were getting to folks late. As an aside, we don't have public hearing on the agenda tonight. We do have a gentleman that showed up that did just recently get the letter. So I would seek permission from the commission to add to the agenda to hear comments from him.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Make a note here. Okay, so again, I'm sorry, your name is,
My name is Warren Wallen.
hey, Warren.
I own farmland up in Grove, Section 7. There's since 1994. I love it down here. I'm originally from Glenville, Minnesota. Taxes are half the price of what they are down here. They're that much. I like it down here. I'm just wondering, zoning scares me. When I went through a house remodel, the county had to know what I was doing, how I was doing, how many times it was going to be inspected. And I'm wondering, is that what's coming to Worth County now? I also am a township supervisor for Freeman Township in Freeport County. And we're fighting, trying to keep windmills out of our township. Now, if that's what this zoning commission is for, I'm all for it. I'm not a windmill.
So let me give you the background on this. I don't know if you're aware, Worth County has a zoning ordinance. We've had a zoning ordinance for many years, since the 70s. That zoning ordinance historically has only applied to 3 townships out of the 12 in the county. It's the 3 townships that run along the interstate. So it's Heartland, Brookfield, and Danville townships. Last year, the zoning commission did a lot of work with regard to the wind ordinance. The board of supervisors asked us to look into rules regarding commercial wind development. So in June last year, we gave a recommendation to the supervisors for a county-wide commercial wind ordinance that put rules in place for wind turbines, how far they have to be away, their noise levels, things of that nature. That ordinance has sat with the county supervisors through to today. They've not taken it up for vote. In January, when they looked at taking it up for a vote, they decided, based on advice that they had, that if they were to vote and pass that wind ordinance, that since the county was only had zoning for 3 townships, that the wind ordinance, if they passed it countywide, it probably wouldn't stand, because there would be an argument that wind is being treated differently than any other development. So the supervisors asked us in January to look at the question of extending countywide zoning. Now, countywide zoning has been the subject of recommendations back as far as 2006. The county created a countywide development plan. And there was a separate committee that created that development plan. That development plan called for countywide zoning. At the time, the board of supervisors decided not to extend zoning countywide. So it's just been said. So in February, this zoning commission took up the question, looked into it, made an initial determination that we should extend zoning to apply countywide. We should have rules equal to everybody across the county, not just a quarter of the county. So we had a public hearing in February about that direction. Subsequent to that, the next step, if we're going to recommend the zoning ordinance apply countywide, the next step then is for us to make recommendations on the zoning assignments, to actually assign the zones to the land. Now, let me say first off that zoning has absolutely nothing to do with taxes. Taxes comes out of the assessor's office, and taxes are based on how the land is being used on that particular day, that year. So it could be zoned one way and taxed different. Our direction thus far, and the subject of the public hearing that we had on Tuesday last week, was to let folks know that our intent would be to zone everything in those 9 other townships as agriculture, with exception of those properties that we know are not ag, scrap yards, gravel pits, commercial properties, things of that nature. And that's what the meeting tonight is about. We also called attention to folks about the ag exemption in Iowa. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but state law and the county ordinance says if you're zoned as agriculture and you're actively farming that land, then anything that you do in direct support of the production of agriculture is exempt from zoning. So your primary dwelling, your barns, your grain bins, machine sheds for your equipment, all of that stuff is exempt from zoning permit requirements if they're in direct support of the production of agriculture. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at.
Well, that was my question, is because anybody that knows me knows I don't have any buildings down here. But my intent was I'm gonna be 59 here in June. When my sons hopefully take over the operation in Minnesota, I'm not up there for the taxation reasons.
Sure.
Down here, but if I'm gonna be
Yeah. So
zoned
if you're,
for putting up my residence,
yeah. So if it's
maybe a
zoned
grain
as
bin or a
if
shop,
it's zoned as ag and you're farming that property, you can build a primary dwelling. It's exempt from zoning requirements. And again, barns in support of the production of agriculture, machine sheds for your equipment, all of those things are exempt. If you put up secondary, if you put up a secondary dwelling or something, we're deciding as You're gonna go into the chemical business or something, that's a different story.
Well, my next question is if I'm done before that point, or my sons wanted to move there and wanted to put up a repair shop or a warehousing or whatever, because I work with Overly Seed House quite a bit. Business working.
Yeah, so if it's purely a seed business and you don't have a showroom, then that's a permitted use in the ag zone and would not require a permit. If you have a showroom or you get into chemical business, that's a different story.
I'm in customer service. I'm not in sales. I'm not.
Sure. Did that answer your questions?
It's pretty much done them all in a nutshell, other than the fact is, please don't let us take windmills unless we absolutely have to, because I don't want to sell even my wind rights.
Yeah, well, that's something you need to bring up to the county supervisors. We've provided them a very comprehensive ordinance related to commercial wind. Once they get our recommendation on zoning, I'm sure they'll be taking up the question of wind.
Will the zoning of that, my mother-in-law lives just inside Winnebago County. There's nothing to say about that.
Mhm.
82 miles. She has 3 out of the 4 directions from her house are absentee landlords. Paycheck. Setbacks and all that. All I ask for is that. I understand why the absentee landlord will take an extra check. But it leaves it up for everyone left here. I'm sorry, it ruins my view.
Right, yeah.
I'm here for a reason.
Yeah, the ordinance, the language that we had provided to the supervisors, they've gone through and they've made some changes to it. But it does address setbacks from residents, it addresses sound, it addresses shadow. Now, those are the big 3. There's a lot of other things that the ordinance addresses. Now, that's only gonna apply to Worth County, it wouldn't have anything to do with
No, I understand.
Winnebago, so.
I understand. Now, also, as a Freeman Township supervisor, we are in talks with a lawyer now to try to keep big equipment off of our township roads. Is there any chance that Worth County can do that with the secondary roads?
We have language in that draft ordinance that addresses certain requirements on the part of the developer. It doesn't keep them off the roads, but puts certain restrictions in place and put certain requirements in place for them to maintain the roads and to do any repairs after the fact.
Roads east of here, some of them are really beautiful.
Yes,
They're gonna be expensive. I would assume for Worth County to keep them up.
Yeah.
Because they can't digress over the next 20, 30 years either.
Right.
For needing to come in, so that's all unnecessary cost on the county. I realize it's on.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to eliminate in our township, since we still have township.
Sure.
Other than that, I appreciate your time. I'll be out of here and let you go from there.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, and I'm sorry about the tardiness on the letter. We didn't have any direct control on it.
If you're perfect, I really don't want to work with you. I want to work with imperfect people because I'm imperfect myself.
Okay, on the heels of that, the next on the agenda is discussion on public comments. Anybody have any discussion on the comments in general before we get into some of the details here?
In general, most people still are not educated on what we really are doing versus the taxes. Hopefully, a lot of people watch that meeting and catch it and listen to everything you said and everything, everybody said.
Yeah, and I think we just have to keep saying it, keep getting that information into the paper, although it's also been very clear that there's a lot of people in the county that don't read the paper or don't get the paper. So we gotta get the message out. Hopefully the coffee shop folks will talk to each other about what they've read in the paper.
Well, I got a couple of phone calls. Once you explain it to them, they're like, oh, that's nothing like I heard.
That's been the reaction that I've seen. Okay, Well, there's a lot of yellow on this list. All of this yellow is really just from a few spots. So Sherm, I forget his last name, operations manager for BMC down in Waterloo. He said that he wants all of the land that BMC owns or controls to be zoned as industrial. Same comment that David Falk had made Tuesday. And
Did he send you anything in writing or is that? just-
he did. No, I've got email from him.
Okay.
Yep. Likewise, from David Falk, he gave me these additional properties for the quarry here south of Northwood. And then he said there's a couple of other properties. There's 2 properties just south of the dump, the city dump over here
Yeah.
that Falk has. And there's a couple of parcels down by Manley that they're mining, that they're quarrying, and he's added those. And then I also heard from Mitch, I don't remember his last name, with Yulin Brothers, who has the quarry just east of where the Falkstone quarry is. And he gave me a list of all of the properties that they own or control. He wanted those added. And I got a call from Buck at Buck's Recycling. I don't know why his wasn't on there the first time.
I thought
It was supposed to be. Don't know why it wasn't in the mailer, but anyway, he wanted to make certain that his property south of Kensett and the properties at Manley were on here, which raises another question with regard to Manley and the 2 mile extraterritorial zone. So Matt O'Brien at NICOG says that even though Manley has that 2 mile extraterritorial zone now, the county has purview over all of the unincorporated lands. Manley's claim for the extraterritorial zone was based on the fact that the county was not zoned. So he says the county needs to zone it. Then if Manley wants to reclaim that 2 mile extraterritorial zone, they have to redo that through a 28E agreement with the supervisors. So I added Manley Terminal property that was essentially the big yard that's inside that 2 mile zone. So I've added that. When Buck called me about Buck's Recycling, and I looked at the map here. You see the purple line, which got really dim, is the city limit. Well, Buck's property is here. There's a number, right, Rheingold's here, there's a bunch of other properties down here that are commercial properties. And it's a slew of them, they're all chopped up down there. I did not list all of those. My suggestion would be that what we would recommend to the supervisors is that with regard to the properties in that 2 mile area around Manley, that they should be zoned by the county consistent with the current zoning in place through the Manley zoning.
So if you go to the north, I want to see where it ends on the north side. As far as, I can't think of purple lines.
So the purple line is right here. So you got the little housing development.
Yep.
Dan
That's Murray Hill,
lives here. Yep, right.
right where your cursor is,
Mhm.
that's Via Fields, and that needs to be zoned commercial. Basically, everything, yeah, and Manly's got it all zoned commercial from there. What, the middle, I think it's about the middle of the circle track is where the 2 mile ends, is that correct?
Roughly, yeah. It actually splits. It's right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, I mean, it's right
Yeah.
on the middle of the circle track, so right now, yeah, that's zoned industrial and. To me, anything that's in there, yeah, I agree with you, it's Manly's zoned industrial, because we know. All of Sabins is zoned industrial.
Right.
The terminal.
Yeah. And we know Saban wanted, they contacted
Yeah.
a year ago, well, a year and a half ago now, saying that they wanted to get those industrial. So does that recommendation seem feasible rather than try to get what those zones are right now tonight? Just our recommendation is whatever zone assignments Manley has given them, use the comparable zone for the county.
I agree with that. And I would like to have copies of those emails, Jeff, from DMC, et cetera.
Yep, I'll put them out on the shared drive, yeah.
Because, I'd like to have the written proof that
Yep.
these people from our first zoning, we said A1, they said, please do,
Yep,
so that way we have a paper trail.
yep, yeah. This is Mitch from Uland. And like I said, I'll put that stuff out on the shared drive.
Good.
And then you had noted the Via Field property in Grafton.
Yeah, it wasn't on the, I was
I know
sure.
Well, we talked about it, but I went back and I listened to the recording from the week before when we were in here.
Yeah,
It was talked about, but it wasn't ever said to add it.
I thought it was on, NICOG's list.
I didn't see it. I went back and looked and I didn't see it. So I've added the property that's there at Grafton.
Yes. It should be.
So, so we've got the BMC, the Falk stuff, Bucks, the Manly Terminal, the Via Field, Suka got brought in with the Manly Terminal stuff, that same, he's in
Yeah.
that south part.
Yep.
And
Well,
then-
that should be within the Sukup's within the 2 miles as part of whatever.
Yeah, yep,
Man says it is.
right. And then we've got the other Bucks properties and this is all Uland stuff here. Anything else on the parcels that would be non-ag?
Could you look up that one? Text you?
Oh, no, I didn't. So do you have a number off the top of your
Oh,
head?
no, I don't.
Okay, can you guide me to it? It's where?
Oh,
Oh, that wasn't.
I thought that was Danville, so I pulled it up the other day, I went, ooh, that's not it.
Okay, so where should I
The
go?
line's right there, isn't it?
Find highway now.
Yeah, that's railroad tracks.
Right there, there's curve right there where it says down, where that curve is in the road, down. Oh, right there, that one.
Pro Ag Solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're
I
saying,
went by that, I was like, when did that change from catalogs?
so 09-26-206.
Yeah. It's time to do it. And that's what I was wondering too, when I was looking at all those properties. We went there and just-
Yeah.
Those look like we've got live.
No, it is. I mean,
It's a small parcel.
that parcel itself is pretty good. No, but the thing is, and I'll still go back to say, okay, it's currently operating as per DOL. It currently looks like a duck, acts like a duck, it is a duck. And as long as he doesn't change anything, he can keep operating the duck.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So,
Right, if he wants to sell it as a business, or he wants to change it from being.
Or
As is.
expand it.
Right, he wants to add another bulk tank, Larry's. Plus years old, so I think he's gonna make significant changes. And when he sells his fuel truck and sells the tank, what do you got?
yeah, back to me.
You're an acreage, so do you make it a duck, or do you let him, is it a business or not?
I didn't catch the first part of what it is he's doing.
He's a bulk fuel,
Uh,
is what he is. So there's tanks on the
It's got
farm,
bulk tanks on the farm.
he's got bulk tanks on the farm. And he's got a fuel truck.
And the acreage looks like it's separate.
So that parcel should be light industrial then. And again, without exception, the gravel pit folks said, I got this parcel, 100% of it's being farmed right now, but I don't want to have to do anything 2 years from now when I decide to run my gravel pit into there.
Yep.
So if you can tag it that way now and it's not gonna impact my taxes, do it.
Yep.
And I think what we should do, so if the guy's got bulk tanks there, make it light industrial and he can continue doing whatever he's doing, he's expanding. Nobody's gonna be able to say anything when he wants to expand.
Yeah, that's the,
I mean, otherwise, what's gonna happen is if he wants to add another tank, then all of the neighbors and their cousins get to weigh in because it has to be rezoned. And they're gonna, there's the potential for this huge hue and cry in front of the supervisors, well, us and the supervisors, saying, no, he can do what he's doing, but he shouldn't be able to grow. It's too close to this, too close to that. So, to your point, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, I say we call him a duck.
Most of those pieces are 07, 10.
Yeah, and it's the same thing we're doing with these other
Everything around it is
properties.
industrial.
What, was that one up north that you guys were looking at last time that we couldn't initially
No.
find?
no,
No, that was Rugland's.
that's Rutherland's, and that's in the zone.
What am I doing?
So what are we,
Okay, if you go, Fern Hills Quarry, go east.
Okay.
Fern Hills Quarry, because I know you know where that's at.
yep, okay, there's Trent Hill, there's Uland.
Okay, if you go straight north on that line, you got it, isn't that right there to the left? Down, I think it's that green piece right there. No, that's Stevenson's, isn't it? You gotta-
No, that's the letters, yeah.
Yeah. So you gotta go
Getting
another
close.
section east, don't you, or is it south? Yep, go one more green strip right,
This one,
nope, down
this one,
That one.
to the other side of the road.
Brian
There
Wallace,
you go. No, then that's Stevens, so what am I,
that's Stevens.
then we're in between the two.
I never drive past this place because it's on a road that goes nowhere. It's that one.
Probably that one, just, yeah. You're getting close to the parcel numbers now, I know that, because it's, I was looking at it earlier.
go
Some ground around it, it's really close.
which way? So here's you.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah, come back here, right
There you
there.
go.
That one?
That one, who's that?
That should be it.
Right there. Yep.
When you look at it, it's partitioned off from the rest of the farm already, it's small. And I think that's all holes in the ground around it. It's really messed up.
So these are bulk tanks. Yeah, look like tanks. Not bins. Okay.
He advertises Bergie oil, there's oil tanks there. And then,
I think that would be a figure too. I think you want-
the thing is, if he retires and sells the fuel tanks off of there. Big deal. Now, the new owner might want to have it rezoned as rural residential, you know, if he sells the place, but doesn't really make any difference.
This puts them line, but can do this.
Correct.
Right.
And most people that are industrial want to be, you know, the quarry people want, but the question is, you need us to tell us that this piece, you want it,
Right,
because I don't know where the rock starts and stops.
right.
You do.
Yep, yep.
So tell us, that was the whole object of the public meeting, tell us what you want, okay.
Okay.
Yes, I'm good with the list.
Right, so one of the things I wanted to bring up, let me go to map again. So,
You have the written from that and asking them to be industrial.
Yeah,
That,
because there's so much.
it's, I like paper.
so in the zoning ordinance right now, it says, in the ag district, single family or farm dwelling, minimum lot area is 35 acres unless the CSR is low, 70 or less, on 75% of the lot, then it can be 1.5 acres. So my property, as an example, I've got 10 acres. 3 of it, so it's less than 75% of the lot, has cropland on it. I have no idea what the CSR rating is. I lease that Nelly Children Farms along with the field next to me. We've run into issues with people recently with this clause in here that has caused them, Harlan Helgeson as an example, last year when he split his property, he had to have the property rezoned to R1 instead of ag because he had 75% of it or more enrolled in CSR. He then took it out of CSR. But anyway, there's a lot of properties. So my property could still be zoned as ag because 75% of it is not. But there's a lot of properties out here that have less than 35 acres that have dwellings on them that may be farming 75% of their parcel with a higher CSR. According to the language in the ordinance today, that would violate the ag designation. My feeling is that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed in the text at some point in the future. But I want to make certain that we're aware of that, so that we're comfortable making a conscious decision to say, we're gonna make this ag designation across all of these properties. Even though we know that technically, some of them would fall beneath or fall, in violation of that criteria, which I don't know why that criteria is written the way it is anyway.
But it's confusing to me.
Yeah, because the rural res is just a single dwelling, it's just, when you read it, it's an acreage. That's all it boils down to, is an acreage.
Was it some sort of attempt to not sell small parcels? Was it an attempt to- Yeah.
The whole object of that is to protect the farm ground. I mean, you go way back when, I mean, the whole object is that if you are farming and you have 35 acres, you can put your primary dwelling up, you're exempt, you don't have to do the building permit, et cetera, et cetera. If you are 10 acres, now you gotta jump through the hoops. Right?
Well, if you're 10 acres, you would have to be classified as R1.
Correct.
Unless you're farming a minority portion of that.
Yeah.
Then you could still be ag. But in my case, I'm not farming it. So my buildings, I have a grain bin on the property. I'm not putting up another one. If anybody wants to buy the one I got, I'll sell it to you. But, my machine shed, if I put up another shop, tore down my house, built a house, all of that would have to get permitted.
Correct.
Even though it is ag, because I'm not farming it. Those buildings are not in support of my production of agriculture.
Correct.
But I just want to make certain that we realize that by saying ag across the board, there's some of these properties that are less than 35 acres that maybe, say they got 20 acres and they're farming 15 of them, along with however many, somewhere out there.
There's typically, my acreage is not partitioned off from the farm. I mean, it is a bank, a separate land description of the acreage. But I don't have a separate survey. And if you look it up on GIS, my acreage is still part of that as well. So that just makes it messy.
Well, yeah, it makes it messier, yeah. But anyway, I think that's something that needs to be cleaned up in the future, and yeah, I think if we fall back to the state law and the very first couple of paragraphs in the zoning ordinance that talk specifically about the ag exemption, and the examples that we just used, whatever I'm gonna build doesn't apply. Whatever you're gonna build doesn't apply, right? Because you're not producing agriculture. I'm not producing. And then we can clean up that other,
Warren owns 100 acres, he can go put his brand new house on that ground.
Right.
It's zoned, and he doesn't have to pay for the permit, he
Right.
doesn't, and it's over the 35 acres.
so I just think it's language that needs to be cleaned up in the ordinance, along with other language that we know needs to be cleaned up in the ordinance. But I did want to raise that just to make sure that everybody's comfortable if we're going to say it's ag, knowing that it'll have to get addressed and cleaned, because there's a lot of stuff in the 3 townships that we can really get to. Okay. All right, any other discussion on the zone assignments then? So we're going to say everything should be ag A1 except these properties and the properties within the 2-mile area of Manly should be zoned comparable to whatever Manly has assigned.
Yes.
Okay, We should vote on that.
Well, first we need to have a motion.
Yep.
I move to accept the list as amended and accept the Manly zoning as applied to apply to ours.
Within that 2 mile
Within the
territory.
2-mile radius.
Okay,
So,
is there a second? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye. Opposed? It is unanimous, the motion carries. So let me just make a note real quick. Okay, just to make sure I got this correct, what I wrote down was all the properties will be zoned as Ag A1 with exception of the list as amended, and the properties within 2 miles of Manly city limits would be assigned a zone comparable to the current Manly assignment. Yep, okay.
Just a quick question, what if somebody comes in and says, no, I want to be zoned industrial?
Well, once the supervisors are done, then these zones are set. And anybody that wants to change the zone would go through the request to change the zoning, which would require the notices and the public hearings.
I just didn't know if there was gonna be a small minor little grace period where they could come in and, no, I want to be zoned industrial, or like, whatever it may be, you know.
well, it would be kind of nice to have a no fee grace period of 6 months after the supervisor pass it. You know, is that something we could do, or, you know, I wish.
I think it's certainly, it's something that we can recommend.
That would be my recommendation, is that, you know, for the first 6 months of the, anybody that wants to be zoned through the process will be fee free.
And just for the discussion on that, but with Manly, we don't have to have any verbiage in there about the other towns doing the same thing, right?
Correct, because Manly's the only one that's claimed that 2 miles.
Everybody else is,
We'll just automatically follow it.
All right, so you want to make a motion to that effect on the 6 months fee free?
I move to have a free 6 months after the passage by the supervisors, the property owners to reassign their zoning.
It's, you know, 6 months. I mean,
I think so. I mean, to me,
they're all gonna probably get a notice, yeah, right?
oh, yeah. We've all been notified.
Yeah, we'll have their letter. Yeah. That's something that-
All right, any other discussion? All right, motion on the table to recommend to the supervisors that after zoning has been applied, that there would be a 6-month period of fee free for zoning changes. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed? It is unanimous, the motion passes. All right, next on the agenda was. What happened to my?
It's meeting's over.
It just. It disappeared. Oh,
Oh.
save that. There. All right. Is our report to the supervisors, which consists of the recommendations. Let's see. Okay. So, did you guys have a chance to read this? Any comments on this?
I
Things that need
have,
to change?
I have one major problem.
Okay,
Right at the bottom, when you talk about the wind ordinance. To me, the wind ordinance has absolutely nothing to do with extending the zoning. I think they're two totally separate issues. I don't like anything about wind ordinance in this.
okay, so, one of the reasons, in fact, the primary reason why I wanted to say anything at all about the wind ordinance in here is to make certain that they understood that they were developed as two standalone, mutually complementary ordinances. That the zoning ordinance, the extension of the zoning ordinance is not intended to replace what we recommended for the wind ordinance.
That's not what I'm reading.
Okay, so
And I,
if we took this out and said,
and I.
so if
If
I,
I'm wrong, if somebody disagrees, please.
Can we work?
I mean, to me, it's two separate items totally. When,
well,
the when, it, and it is and it isn't. Okay, Jeff, I'm gonna agree with you, it is and it isn't. But what we're doing right now is extending countywide zoning. And whether or not the wind ordinance piggybacks on top of it or not, really is a totally separate issue.
it is a separate issue, and they have to take it up as a separate issue.
Yes.
I do think it's important, though, for them to understand, and the rest of the public to understand, that by extending zoning, it does not obviate the need for or change our intent with regard to the wind ordinance. That our intent was that the wind ordinance and the zoning ordinance are complementary. The fact that the zoning ordinance applies countywide doesn't change that. And I'm absolutely fine with taking this part out and adjusting this language, taking it out of the recommendations and just putting it into the text up in this section, just to make it clear. But I think it is important to make it clear, because based on what I've, some of the conversations people have had with me, their belief is that, well, if zoning gets extended countywide, then you don't need the wind ordinance. And that's not the intent. The intent,
Even more mention that again tonight. where everybody's still trying to put it all together.
Yeah,
You're trying to
there's,
separate,
there,
you're trying to tell them that it's separate.
it's two separate complementary things. The two work together. They're both necessary. And that's my primary concern of why I even brought up the topic of wind ordinance in there. So I would still recommend that, we could take this language and say, just talk about the wind ordinance was written to be applicable, whether the county was partially zoned or wholly zoned, no changes, blah, 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 blah. Just lift this and paste it here, take it out of the recommendations.
And I don't want it anywhere.
What would happen if you pulled that whole thing out? Five out, and then if they pass it, we have another letter right away that says, okay, now we recommend, since you passed zoning.
Timing,
Yeah, to.
but that's my concern is timing.
But I agree, if you.
It's taboo having it in there.
Yeah, so if you just completely have it separate, and then we can write another letter, it's just a quick one paragraph letter that says.
So what is your concern, David, with this just statement of fact? Which is really all it is. It's takes this recommendation stuff out of there and says,
My problem, Jeff, is countywide zoning
mhm,
is about zoning.
yep,
It's not about the window. And an ordinance to me is a totally separate issue.
mhm,
And I truly believe they are separate. Right now, what I want to send to the supervisors is only the fact that countywide zoning is important. Now, you pass that, whether or not you do anything with wind ordinance, that's still a separate issue.
mhm.
The reason why they're doing countywide zoning is the lawyers basically said, you can't do this.
You can't apply it countywide.
Can't apply it countywide, you can apply it to these townships. Whether or not you choose to do that or not, that's fine. But right now, my whole thing is wind is something totally separate. Once this is done, now you want to talk about wind, we sure can. We've already sent it to them once, and we have an ordinance in place. Do I think that's a good ordinance? Yes. But
It's almost.
this is first, what came first, the horse or the cart? Well, to me, you gotta have the horse. Once you bought the horse, now we can go buy a cart later, but I can still ride the horse. I don't have to have the cart. I can still ride that horse.
This was something that should have been completed long before the wind
And
ordinance.
this thing is not, to me, zoning. The zoning ordinance we have, get countywide, is not part of wind, in my opinion, but. And
I agree, it's not part of it. All I'm trying to do is clarify to the supervisors and the public, right? Because this is a message to the public as much as it is to the supervisors. Again, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there with regard to the wind ordinance and zoning, and just telling people that, the supervisors and them, that they stand together. The two are intended to work together. Zoning does not take away from the need for the wind ordinance.
But by simply mentioning it, it puts them together. And we're trying to do this. We're trying to, no matter what happens with wind ordinance, we want to get countywide zoning. It's something that's needed to happen for a long time. And just by simply using those words, no matter what you're saying is absolutely correct and true, but just by putting them in this document with the countywide zoning, gets everybody in an uproar, suspicions, doubts, what am I really reading? Even though it looks plain to read it, it's still in there, and it dirties the document.
Dana?
I see it both ways. I mean, the biggest thing for me is we've given our recommendation on the wind at this point, so this document should be our recommendation on zoning countywide and just leave it at that.
Justin?
Yeah, that's what I agree. Just keep it as zoning and say reminding.
Okay,
If need be.
what else?
Now, I think you wrote a very, very good document there, Jeff. Like I say, right up to the point where I got ready to, I'm like, God, you've done a really nice job. And I get right to the bottom, and I'm like, I don't want wind being part of this document because this is necessary whether or not you pass the wind or not, supervisors. I really don't care whether you pass the wind or not. That's a second issue. But I got on zoning a long time ago, and it goes back to the 2006 when they said we'd like to have countywide zoning. I'm like, cool, they're finally gonna get it. And I've had a lot of people talk to me about why they don't want zoning, but that's absolutely nothing to do with wind. And I've had people talk to me why they want zoning, but it has nothing to do with wind. I mean, it isn't. I understand it's piggyback, but it's separate.
Okay,
And I want the cone zoning and always have the wind. And in some respects, Jeff, I will say, one of the things is countywide zoning does have an effect on the wind.
it has an effect on wind by itself,
Correct.
but to a lesser degree than the wind ordinance. Yes.
There's some protection there
Yes,
for landowners. Because it is,
In this example, you can replace wind with any other thing down the pipe, and that's why.
and that's the whole, I've had, well, we're on the map, what happened right across from Brian Walder on Stevens' Stokely Farm with that manure. That turkey composting. I feel for those people out in that area. I would not want that business next to me. But it came in because it wasn't zoned. So it's not about just stopping wind, but, I was talking to my sister, being on the Board of Adjustments, and there's nothing we voted against. In all the years, I've never voted against somebody wanting to change the zone for a variance. I mean, it's not that restrictive, people, but it's hoops to jump through, and that's what Dave Phelps was saying.
Right.
I know I'm gonna mine it, I don't wanna jump through the. Okay, I agree,
right.
so just get it done.
Anything else on this, Todd, Justin, Dana? Okay,
Can you dumb this down for me?
so we'll say this is April 6th.
One thing that gets me is that people talk to me about zoning that they don't want.
But they want all the protections.
Well, but one of the things is, okay, give me a really good reason why you don't want it. I just don't want the rules.
Yeah. So one of the things I said in here is that a vote was held to reaffirm the recommendation to extend the applicability of the existing ordinance. Now, we voted just a short while ago to apply the zone designation of ag. We said to all the lands. But just for clarity, our intent is countywide. Right? We say apply these zone designations of ag to all the lands except blah, blah, blah.
Correct.
Right?
That aren't,
Yeah.
minus the 3.
Right.
If you're industrial in 3, you're still a customer.
Okay, so is. Okay, anything else on the recommendation? Hearing nothing else, then I will use this as the report to the supervisors. I'll get added to the agenda for Monday and give the supervisors our recommendation. The supervisors, they're gonna have to go through their process. They have to first pass a resolution to have public comment on this stuff, and then they go through their public comment period. Take it from there.
Did you have to put any of those notes of the utility?
Oh, I'll add, yeah, so where I talked about the enclosure.
Dave, whatever those you can.
Well, that's in there. I mean, I can put one up. Yeah. You know, I honestly looked at putting, just dabbled with that as a consultant. If I put $50,000 into the bank, it probably is gonna make me more money over the next 50 years than putting up solar panels.
Oh, when that A-frame.
Yeah.
Base. A-frame, two down the middle. All that is light bulb through the night piece of tube. And then in between each so many units. You know, what I mean? Growing, I was really impressed in how much students these men.
So you gotta, yeah. I'm not saying solar is a bad
Big
thing.
thing
That's,
that's between mine and yours is you've got enough panels to make it worth it. For enough in, because the way the situation is going. So I only have enough to curtail part of my small electric bill. By the time I pay insurance and maintenance. I haven't done anything to help me tax wise. Tax is a tax rate.
yeah,
But if they go to the county to tax. For solar, I either have to make it bigger. Right. Because I will be going backwards.
yeah,
You know,
that's what I looked into, and I'm like, by the time I got, like, and I'm not sure how big you have to go where. And I'm not against solar by any means, it's just when you look at the dollar value, and it helps you, you're right, you're on tax, wise, on the business side.
if you don't have a business-
Okay, so in the recommendations, I talk about the enclosure. Has our recommendations for the zone assignments, so I'll print this out as the enclosure. I'll take out the highlights and I'll fill in the names of the 9 townships. And then this will be the enclosure to that report.
Yeah.
And it's got the statement here about everything should be A1 except this, and the properties within 2 miles of. All right. Any other discussion on this stuff? All right. Agenda item number 7 is discussion for new business. We have paused on the work on the county development plan, getting the goals graded. We have heard from at least 1 or 2 of the supervisors that they're probably gonna redo the zoning commission if they extend zoning countywide. So I would suggest we could still move forward with getting folks to grade the county comp plan. That's gonna help feed any work that the next zoning commission is gonna do. I think there's a number of things that is gonna have to be taken up in the zoning ordinance, once this is done. That's my thoughts on what we should be working on next. You guys' opinions?
We're coming up on another busy season again. That's one of the problems.
Well, getting the surveys out there for getting the goals graded. You know, we can give people a fair amount of time on that, so I don't think that's gonna take, and then, once we get those grades back, you know, time will have ticked by. Maybe a whole new zoning commission by then. We'll at least have that part done, that I think will help feed any work that has to be done for updates on the comp plan, and then updates in the zoning ordinance. But I don't see a large need to delay trying to get that stuff graded. No,
Between now and then, it's perfect.
yeah, it just serves as input into the next body of work.
After Mother's Day, it's different things.
Anything else? All right. Without objection, the meeting is adjourned.